Hello friends and others. Where am I coming from? What does the world need with another YouTuber at this point? Well, I think that's a pretty good question. So I'm going to try to answer it in this video. Before YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and all the rest discovered that a free interchange of ideas would destroy the left, the openness of these platforms created a resurgence in libertarian and conservative philosophy because suddenly ideas were on the table again. I think this shocked the piss out of the powers that be behind these new enterprises because they clearly thought the opposite would happen. Otherwise, they wouldn't be scrambling to put that horse back into the barn with all the shadow banning and algorithms designed to find and destroy everything that attacks the left. But when I first started looking around YouTube a few years ago, before I realized all of that, the one emotion I can put my finger on is relief. I let out a huge sigh of relief because I was beginning to think that I was the only one left. I stumbled across voices out there that I was beginning to think did not exist anymore. To see people out there not only espousing the virtues of free markets, but being successful at it. It took a lot of the pressure off of me because those are generally my views, and they certainly never helped to make me more popular. I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders to do my best to fix all of this, and I'm not a particularly ambitious person. It's likely I'm never going to catch on in any sense while I'm alive anyway, because I don't particularly enjoy talking at all. And I certainly don't enjoy marketing myself. My perfect view of life is just playing some golf, drinking good European beer, and being in the proximity of attractive women at least. I understand this is not a very heroic stance on life, but I worked very hard as a child, and I hadn't really planned to work that hard as an adult. As a person who likes to think, on the other hand, I want to do my thinking better than everyone else does, as with any other game or serious endeavor. Knowing that, I also know that for biological computers, doing it better has to do with processing time, as with any other computer. That means that analyses are carefully considered, and therefore such computations are scripted as a function of their fundamental nature. That also makes them less conflicted. In other words, more accurate. But what it doesn't make them is more entertaining. What's more entertaining is spontaneous content, live chats, etc. What's entertaining is the tightrope and the chance of utter disaster. There are very talented and intelligent political philosophers on the web right now who do an amazing job of representing their ideas in spontaneous situations, such as television and radio interviews, live chats, and the like. I've only put myself in those situations a few times, and though I think I did pretty well in live interviews, etc., I always know that I would prefer to contemplate a question and formulate a deduction. I simply view it the same as a computer chess game, for example. If you're playing on a beginner level, the computer is limited by time for its calculations, and thus is not as good as it would be when set to an advanced level, with more time for consideration of possible moves. This just describes why I'm not acting in the same genre as successful YouTube artists. I'm never going to release 3 videos a day giving the same opinion that everyone else I admire will have on some current event meme. I probably won't wow you often with my spontaneous and emotional delivery. If I see a wide range of great YouTubers out there saying what I would say, that's a great time for me not to release a video, even though doing so would increase my subscriber count and potential for income. What you're going to see on this channel is something unique. I'm going to focus on my deductions. My videos will not be dated or dateable. If I see the community of liberty-loving thinkers out there making mistakes, that's when I'm going to do a video explaining that and correcting them. It's not that I enjoy YouTube, and I've often said I'd rather eat a bowl of glass shards than speak in public. I'm doing it for the following reason. Because I have a unique point of view that enables me to solve puzzles in a way that other people just can't do, even the best of them. And that's why I've always felt a responsibility to make an effort. Maybe it's that my father spent 22 years in active war zones fighting communists before he died. Or maybe it's just that I recognize how rare my vision is. But it seems to me I'd be kind of a dick to his memory and to the memory of those who founded the United States and to those who fought and died for it if I didn't at least try to communicate. Some YouTuber commented on one of my videos that I'm late to the party. I take that to mean that I'm here after the new algorithms are in place, so there's not a chance in hell for organic growth on my new channel. That's true enough, but let's consider whether I'm late to the party in general. When I graduated from college in 1992, I was so disturbed by the experiences in state-funded education institutions throughout my life that the first thing I did was write this book. It's called The Answers to All the World's Problems. That's even a sort of a sarcastic title that indicates my state of mind at the time. Of course, it would be properly The Solutions to Problems, but that's not how I heard people talk about it. I heard Bono of U2 at some time saying, I don't have the answers to all the world's problems, but I do, and they're right here. It's basically 340 pages of tiny print off the top of the head of a mind of a guy in his early 20s. I didn't have any goal of publishing it or any view toward a potential audience or income or any of that. I just had to get those thoughts off my chest and onto paper. It was years later that I actually did publish it, with no editing whatsoever. If you can find a copy, which would probably be one of the used copies out there that far outnumber the total sales of the book, it reads exactly the way it did off the top of my head, with all of the typos and anything else one might expect from a first draft intact. But what it will also show is that I understood 25 years ago what was going on in this country, and that there is nobody anywhere on this planet who can match my analysis, and therefore nobody left for me to look up to. I respect a lot of YouTubers, and as I said, I'm relieved that there are great minds and fighters for our cause out there. But as much as I have to learn from them on marketing, they have to learn from me on political philosophy. I'm never going to be the guy who repeats himself 20 times a week on current news talking points just so I can make $10 a video, because that would bore me. I wouldn't enjoy doing that more than any menial job. I'm going to try, however, to release at least one video per week, mainly to increase the probability that my ideas don't die with me. My experience is that there's not a lot of glory in being right. No good deed, indeed, goes unpunished in my experience. So if you are right, you probably should prepare to be satisfied with that being your main reward in this life. And now I'm going to read a passage from that original book, which I'll do from time to time to show how prescient it really was and is. And this shows my age because I never really needed glasses until I turned 50. Here's a chapter called Political Philosophy, One or the Other. As I touched upon earlier, there are many, many names for the different plans that people have written about or implemented for controlling the events that occur in a geographical area. When these plans are implemented, they are governments, and those geographical areas become nations. Among the names of authors who have written about their political ideas or philosophies are Karl Marx, Thomas Jefferson, Adolf Hitler, James Madison, and Friedrich Nietzsche. Practitioners of government have been, in some instances, born into governing families, as in a monarchy. They've been military figures such as Napoleon or Alexander, or they have been elected by some body of individuals. In all cases, there is some underlying political philosophy from which governors draw their justification for governing. Each political philosophy is an extension of the overall philosophy of life possessed by those who embrace the political system. I believe that most people today probably never take the time to consider the concept of political philosophy closely. Political philosophy may seem to be like the title of a boring class that one might take in college. Others consider themselves to be conservatives or liberals, and they believe that these terms sufficiently represent their political philosophy, when many of them don't really know or have firm ideas about how this government or how government in general should be implemented. In the next chapter, I want to illustrate how the current two-party system in the United States creates an ambiguous diversion, which lowers considerably the visibility of effective solutions. In this chapter, however, I want to address more specifically confusion about the seemingly various philosophies of governing people. First, I want to expand on some points about the one philosophy which I've covered mostly in this book thus far. That is the philosophy that we are created equal, and that we each have unalienable rights which arise out of facts in nature, that we are alive, that we must create to survive, and that we must acquire property from the environment to survive. The political philosophy that arises from those notions is that we, the individuals, will agree to fund the common defense of our life, liberty, and property. Under this political philosophy, people are free. In nature, people are free. In nature, people must defend themselves and their property against those who would attack them. Under this political philosophy, government is only the extension of that defense of liberty. The government is to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. To all of those readers among you who never really thought that you could grasp the seemingly broad range of political philosophies, and to those of you who are scholars of politics, there is one logical fact that you must accept. In all possible forms of government, other than the example above, events are introduced into the natural chaotic system of interacting individuals and other elements that make up a society that are contrary to many important elements of that system's nature. In the American political philosophy model, every individual is free to draw upon all of his or her gifts and resources, saving or employing them as each citizen chooses toward the development of the type of life chosen by that person. Each individual is free to trade with others as they mutually agree. Each individual gets an equal role in choosing the representatives who will make and enforce laws which carry out the task of securing liberty. And each individual is assured by law that government is constitutionally limited to that task alone. Any change to that political philosophy, regardless of the philosophy's name, as a simple logical fact, removes liberty proportionate to the size of the change. That is a natural, mathematically sound fact. Regardless of the change in political motivation from the mere purpose of securing individual freedom, it must follow that some unnatural events will occur. If one society by nature rewards each person according to the quality and quantity of creativity, as would be the natural case if its sole purpose were to secure freedom, then changes in that purpose would create situations in which some individuals are rewarded without quality of creativity, and others who have shown great quality of creative effort may see no rewards at all. There's a couple of different examples of this essentially. One is the example of the tyrant, where power is selfishly corrupt. The other extreme is that of government charity, where some individual is granted unearned property under law. The first example is obviously enough to free people negative, but the second example creates a lot of unnecessary confusion. At these points of confusion, distrust regarding the paradoxical principles to which I refer throughout this text is revealed. Welfare programs, to touch upon a domestic example, catch plenty of challenges from many people, and many of these challenges are perceived in return as cold and selfish, as unwilling to do their part to help heal society. This is often seen as a question of mere generosity versus selfishness. There are a few elements left out of the picture, almost always, and this has led to a great deal of confusion. These elements are expressed in two questions. Who is at the helm of that generosity? and who lies at the origin of its funds. In the natural model, the government protects the property and liberty of individuals. Included in that freedom, and among those properties is, of course, the choice to be generous or selfish or any combination. The problem with the government being generous is an insurmountable one. Some individual must be rewarded less than his or her quality of creativity. Some individual must, as the rule of law, give up to some degree that freedom to choose to the government. One's freedom must be suspended for the government to supply more than freedom to another. This is fact. Political philosophy all comes down in one way or another to whether or not that suspension is acceptable. In Nazi Germany, Jews were slaughtered and the gold was extracted from their teeth for the Nazi effort. The suspension was acceptable. The creativity of the Jews was deemed unnecessary. Their successes and failures were not to play on the stage of nature, as they otherwise may have. These were foregone in the interest of extending greater freedoms to others. Most people will not accept a comparison between welfare in America and the actions of Nazis in Germany. To many, the latter is obviously evil and the former is compassionate. If one were to consider the notion that a properly functioning society allows the prerequisite of compassion, the economic freedom of compassionate individuals, and that many other aspects of this current less than free society are causal to the economic depression of those in need of compassion in the first place, then it would be reasonable to conclude that efforts to impede the natural state of affairs under any guise, including the mask of compassion, would have in common both the propaganda of government compassion and ultimately the negative physical effects of Hitler's fascist ideology. That consideration will be made in progressive detail as this book continues. In the meantime, the main idea to understand from this chapter is that there need be no confusion about the concept of political philosophy. It would seem that there are many, many different ways to approach politics, but it is really much, much more simple. There are really only two political philosophies, and they can be described as follows. Number one, the creative and peaceful prosper. All benefit from the products of their innovation. This is the defense of liberty and property model. Number two, the strong and violent survive until someone or something stronger and more violent kills them. This is the suspension of liberty and property rights model. There is no significant difference between any political philosophy that strays from the path set into motion by the Declaration of Independence. They merely differ with respect to the identity of the individuals responsible for abridging the life, liberty, and property of other individuals, the facade behind which those individuals operate, and the identities of those to whom the spoils are granted. 1992. Thanks for watching.